She knew it was wrong the moment his lips brushed her neck, but she didn't pull away. One quiet night, an unexpected kiss from her stepson shattered every line she thought she'd never cross. Now, a storm of forbidden feelings, unresolved pasts, and one shocking message threatened to change everything. What happens when guilt, desire, and secrets collide under the same roof? And just when she thought the worst was over, she texted. "Stay with me, because this isn't just a love story, it's a line between right and wrong that's about to snap. You won't believe what happens next." It started on a rainy Sunday evening, the kind where the world feels hushed, like it's waiting for something to happen. The house was quiet, too quiet, except for the soft hum of the storm outside and the occasional creak of the old wooden floorboards. I had just made a cup of tea, trying to relax after a long week, when he walked in, my stepson, David. He's 22, thoughtful, a little reserved, but there's always been something in his eyes. A quiet intensity. We've always gotten along, maybe even too well, and lately, I had started to notice the space between us growing tighter, harder to ignore. That evening, there was something different in the way he looked at me. Not just with warmth, but with a kind of tension that made my skin prickle. He sat on the edge of the couch, closer than usual, asking how I was, if I needed anything. I smiled, tried to brush it off, told him I was fine, just tired. But then he reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering just a second too long. I should have said something then. I should have drawn a line. But instead, I froze. The moment stretched, heavy and silent, like the pause before thunder. And then, slowly, deliberately, he leaned in, his breath warm, his eyes searching mine like he was waiting for a sign to stop. I whispered, "This is wrong." I meant it. But I didn't move away. I didn't stop him when his lips brushed my neck, sending a wave of confusion and heat through me. My heart was racing, my thoughts a tangled mess of reason and feeling. It was just a kiss, barely that, but it lingered like a secret I couldn't shake. I pulled back, finally, searching his face for an answer, or maybe hoping he'd give me a reason to pretend it hadn't happened. But David just looked at me, not apologetic, not smug, just calm, as if he knew this moment was coming. I stood up, my hands trembling slightly, and told him I needed a minute. But as I walked away, I couldn't ignore the question ringing in my mind, was this really just a mistake, or the beginning of something I wasn't ready to face? I went upstairs and closed the door behind me, trying to breathe through the whirlwind in my chest. The rain was louder now, tapping against the windows like it was keeping time with my heartbeat. I kept telling myself it was just a moment, a strange, emotional slip. But deep down, I knew it wasn't the first time I'd felt that edge between us shift. Maybe I had just ignored it before. Maybe I wanted to. David came into my life 5 years ago when I married his father. Back then, he was still in college, quiet but polite, always respectful. We didn't spend much time alone together, not really. But after the divorce, yes, his father and I didn't last. David stayed close. He said he didn't want to lose me, that I felt more like family than anyone else had in a long time. I believed him. Maybe that's why I let my guard down. Maybe that's why it's all gotten so confusing. Lately, we've been spending more evenings just talking, sharing meals, watching old movies, telling stories. I should have seen it coming, the way he'd look at me a little too long, the way his hand would brush mine like it meant more than it should. But I always dismissed it, told myself he was just affectionate, just kind. I thought I had control. I thought I was being careful. Now, every glance feels loaded, every silence stretched too thin. I don't know what he's thinking, if he regrets it, if he's waiting for me to say something. And I can't tell if I'm more afraid of him bringing it up again, or of him never mentioning it at all. Because something has shifted, something I can't unfeel. And the worst part is, I'm not sure I want to. The next morning, I tried to act like nothing had happened. I went about my routine: coffee, toast, checking emails, but my hands were shaky, and my mind kept drifting. I could hear David moving around downstairs, and each sound made me tense. When I finally walked into the kitchen, he was already there, dressed, calm, like it was just another ordinary day. He smiled at me like always, but there was something behind his eyes. He didn't say anything about last night. And neither did I. But the silence between us said more than words ever could. Days passed, and things felt normal on the surface, but underneath, it was all twisted. Every time we sat near each other, I felt the air change. We never talked about boundaries, never said what that moment meant or didn't mean. Maybe we were both afraid of what the answer would be. Or maybe we already knew. There was also the matter of his father. We don't talk about him much, he's been out of the picture for a while, but he's still a part of the story. And that's where the guilt starts to creep in. Because no matter how distant that past feels, the title still stands: David is my stepson. That word carries weight. A line I never thought I'd even get close to, let alone blur. Then there's Emma, a woman David's been casually seeing for months. I didn't used to think much of it, but now I wonder if she's part of the reason he's holding back, or maybe trying to forget. I saw her name pop up on his phone one night, and I caught myself feeling jealous. It hit me hard. What does that say about me? And still, we haven't talked. But the way he looks at me, it's not over. It all came to a head one Friday night. I had been out running errands longer than usual, trying to clear my head, but nothing worked. My thoughts kept circling back to David, the look in his eyes, the weight of everything unspoken. When I pulled into the driveway, his car was already there. Lights were on. My chest tightened as I stepped inside. He was in the living room, sitting on the couch, staring at the muted TV screen. There was something unreadable in his expression. He looked up when I walked in, but didn't smile. I noticed a glass of whiskey in his hand, something he rarely drank. That alone told me he'd been thinking, too. "I need to ask you something," he said quietly. I paused, frozen halfway out of my coat. My heart started pounding, loud enough that I could feel it in my ears. "Okay," I answered, barely above a whisper. He stood slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. "Did it mean something to you? That night?" His voice was low, almost careful, but the weight behind the words hit like a punch. Everything stopped at that moment. Time. Breath. The noise of the world outside. I felt like I was standing at the edge of something I couldn't step back from. "I don't know," I said honestly, my voice cracking. "It wasn't planned. It shouldn't have happened. But it did." He took a step closer. "Then why haven't we talked about it?" "I'm scared of what I'll say," I told him. "Of what you'll say?" He was right in front of me now, close enough to touch. The space between us felt like a fuse waiting to be lit. His hand brushed mine, tentative. My body froze, torn between reason and feeling. Then the front door opened. The door creaked open slowly, and both of us jumped apart like we'd been caught doing something we shouldn't. My heart nearly stopped when I saw who stepped inside. It was David's father. I hadn't seen him in over a year. We hadn't spoken since the divorce papers were finalized, and I had no idea he was even in town. He stood in the doorway, looking older, tired, but his eyes were sharp. They darted between me and David, reading the room in seconds. The silence was unbearable. I could see the questions forming on his face, even before he said a word. "I was just passing through," he said slowly, his voice neutral, almost casual. "Thought I'd stop by, didn't expect company." David stiffened beside me. "You didn't call." "I didn't think I needed permission to visit my son." The tension was thick enough to cut through. I couldn't speak. My mind was racing. Why now? Why show up unannounced after all this time? David looked at me, then back at his father. "We were just talking," he said, but it didn't sound convincing. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the full truth either. His father stepped in, closing the door behind him. "You two seem close." He said it carefully, but the weight behind the words made my stomach twist. He looked at me longer than he should have, not angry, but suspicious. Something about his gaze told me he didn't believe this was just a friendly visit. I tried to stay composed. "We've been keeping in touch." After everything, David and I stayed connected. He didn't respond, just nodded slowly, but the air shifted. Something in his expression changed, like he was putting pieces together. And then he said, "I think we need to talk." All three of us. The three of us sat in the living room, the silence almost unbearable. The same room where so much had quietly shifted now felt too small, too exposed. David's father sat across from us, his expression unreadable. I couldn't tell if he was angry or just confused, but I knew he sensed something wasn't right. "I've been thinking about it a lot lately," he finally said, folding his hands. "And not just the past. About how things ended between us, and what that means for David." I glanced at David, who sat still beside me, his jaw tight. I felt the weight of everything pressing down, but I knew we couldn't avoid it anymore. "I didn't plan for any of this," I said quietly. "After you and I divorced, I never imagined David and I would stay close. But we did. Maybe too close." "I know how it looks." "It's not just how it looks," David interrupted, his voice steady. "It's what it is. I care about her. Not as a mother figure. Not because of what was. I just do." His father stared at him, stunned. For a long moment, no one spoke. "I knew something was off," he said finally. "I felt it the second I walked in." He looked at me, softer now. But what I didn't expect was to feel relieved. That caught me off guard. "Relieved?" He sighed. "You and I weren't right for each other. I think we both knew that. But seeing you two now, it makes sense. As strange as that sounds." The tension in my chest began to lift, but only slightly. "I'm not saying it's simple," he added. "But I'm not going to stand in your way." Just as I started to breathe again, David's phone buzzed on the table. A message lit up the screen. "Emma." He picked it up and froze. My eyes locked on the screen. The message read, "We need to talk. I'm late." In an instant, the room turned cold again. David's face was drained of color. Everything we thought was ending had just become something else entirely. David stared at the message for a long moment, the phone heavy in his hand. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. His silence said enough. Emma's words, "I'm late," echoed through the room like a slow unraveling of everything we thought we knew. He finally looked up, and I could see it in his eyes, the panic, the doubt, the weight of what might come next. "I didn't know," he said softly. "We haven't even seen each other in weeks." "I didn't think," I nodded, trying to stay calm even as my chest tightened. This wasn't the ending I expected. But maybe that was the point. Real life doesn't wrap itself up in neat lines. It is complicated. It surprises me. His father stood, taking a deep breath. "You both have choices to make. Nothing is simple. But you're adults. And whatever happens next, don't lie to yourselves about what you want." He gave David a firm look, then turned to me. "Take care of each other. Or walk away if you have to. But don't make excuses." Then he left, quietly, like he was giving us space to figure it out on our own. David sat beside me, still staring at the phone. "I have to talk to her," he said finally. "I have to know for sure." I nodded again. "You should." We didn't say much after that. He went to make the call in the other room, and I sat in silence, listening to the rain as it began to fall again outside. A familiar sound. A quiet, steady reminder that life keeps moving, even when you don't feel ready for it. When he came back, his face was pale, but calm. "She's not sure yet. She's taking a test tomorrow." I just looked at him. "Then we wait." He reached for my hand, and this time, I let him. Whatever tomorrow held, regret, love, responsibility, or something else entirely, it would come whether we were ready or not. And maybe the real story wasn't about what happened that night, but what we'd choose to do with it now.